Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video is our AD&D First Edition Greyhawk campaign recap of this previous Monday's game session. So our past Monday's game session was Season 2, Session 7, our 22nd week consecutive of this campaign. So second consecutive gameplay sessions of this campaign. We've been together for 24 weeks and 22 weeks of roughly 3 to 3.5 hour game sessions. And the campaign is going, extremely well. I'm always amazed and satisfied and appreciative of the 9 players that have come together in this campaign, 10 including myself, and just really enjoy running this campaign. And it has become the focus of all of my tabletop gameplay right now, and it will continue to be a major focus. I'm really reluctant to get involved in anything else because I'm finding that anytime that I look to find another 3 hour block anywhere else to do gameplay, myself as a player, or certainly I wouldn't even consider running another game session unless it was a one shot, a one time deal game session, for fear that it would take my head away from just thinking about this campaign and keeping it going, and how to continue making this campaign interesting for my players, interesting for myself, and just keep on growing both the group dynamic that the players have created, their interaction with the campaign and with the main story of the campaign, which they're not even fully aware of yet. I mean, it's still kind of evolving as they're continuing their adventure with the development of the world around them, as far as the locations that they're traveling to, the NPCs that they're encountering, the important NPCs that I think that they will want to keep within their circle of acquaintances and possibly even friendships and reliances along the way as well. And of course there are adversaries, which I am always looking for ways to continue to not just throw adversaries at them for them to crush in a single round, which they tend to do anyway, but some adversaries that have some personality and really add to the story that's going on, and become recurring characters that they will continue, will encounter at least more than once, and therefore become part of their growth as player characters, their growth as a group, and the growth for the campaign as well. Um, I've just mentioned growth like 7 or 8 times, and that growth isn't just for my players. I have grown a great deal as a dungeon master for through this campaign. It's made me realize that there's a lot I could have been doing in the past that I kind of just glossed over, and and there's a variety of reasons for that. I think sometimes we gloss over things because we no longer feel we need to, or we become complacent about various things, or we want to just focus on one aspect of role playing and not all of the aspects of role playing and such. And for this campaign, because the group has really caused me to be much more dedicated to making sure that this campaign runs really well and really long, and is really fulfilling for everyone involved, that I'm always thinking about that next session and how can I make this more interesting for the whole party as a whole, but also each individual player character and therefore each player, and get them involved with it and buying into it. And what I've discovered is that even when we're doing side quests that were designed for an individual player, um, to engage with their character with, that the other players have had their characters take an interest in those things as well. And so that's the kind of benefit that I think, um, every DM someday you all deserve, and I hope that you all get this, is a group of players that just mesh so well with each other, and and develop an honest caring for what each of the characters are experiencing as they're going through their adventures together. And when it comes together like this, it's just, there's nothing else like it. It is so much fun, and it's so fulfilling as a game master to have this happen. And I certainly cannot take, you know, any amount of the credit. Well, I shouldn't say any amount, but I don't take most of the credit for this. Um, I do think that I've done a few things along the way that has helped nurture this, but for the most part, it's just the benefit of having really great players involved in this. So enough gushing over my players and everything. Let's get right to the recap and talk a little bit about our last game session. So I am going to switch views here and just introduce the characters that are in play, and let me make sure I'm in the right place to do this. So we in our last session we had 8 players able to make it. Vaughn, our newest player, she's still working out, becoming our 9th player in the group. She is coming in with her fighter, um, and her fighter was a port over from a previous campaign that I played with her. Our DM is Cedric, or Ivan, who is this group's magic user. And so when the opportunity arose for Amanda, who plays Vaughn, to come into the group, although she had a 2-week delay, um, it's a really good plus to have her coming into the group, because she's a great player, and it just always had a great time having her in the group, and she will fit into this group extremely well. So I'm really excited about that. So going down the list, we have Amalric, our fighter magic user. Angus, our fighter now. He was a ranger, but now he is a fighter, and he's pursuing becoming a bard. So he will carry fighter up through level 7, then switch to thief up to level 7, and then begin his career as a first level bard. Breeze is our elven cleric. Breeze is our elven cleric. Cedric is our magic user, human. Candrius is our human paladin. Crandon is our halfling thief. Mirador is our second human cleric. So we have 2 clerics in the group. And Sparrow is our half-elf druid. So if you've been following this, you've been following that, I have been kind of emphasizing each of the character classes, in each of the adventures. So they'll become like the resident expert for certain things. And in this particular session, once again, Sparrow and her training as a druid is going to come into play in understanding the ecology of the cavern system that they happen to be in. And so every once in a while, I will speak to her and have her do some checks to see what's her knowledge based on various things. And when she is aware of certain information, then I have it revealed through her knowledge base. And so that way, the entire party starts to realize that every one of them has a contribution to be made from time to time, based on their character class and the knowledge base that they would normally have. So this is kind of creating a knowledge base that's based on the characters that the players themselves might not have. Occasionally, players will have knowledge base that their characters wouldn't have, and as a DM, I have to kind of put that in check and say, well, you know what, that's what you know, but your character wouldn't know that. So we try to put things into the perspective of what the characters would know under certain circumstances, and so that's where the metagame and the game itself kind of go back and forth a little bit. Is it's a tough balance to strike when you're dealing, especially with experienced players, but when you're dealing with a group of players that have an understanding of the game. They might know a lot of the lore, or they might know nothing of the lore. You have to keep on, as a DM, keep on thinking about, well, who would know this? I know the player is saying that he or she knows this, but would their character know this? And then that's when you, as a DM, reveal certain information that they may or may not know as a character. So very, very important to do that. I will, while I'm here, shift you over to their current map. Now, I'm not going to leave this map up for very long because I don't want them to see too much. Because I know it's not shadowing this, but they had entered in through this cavern system, and they had gone through N1 to N6 to N4. This is where session, it was around here or so when session 1 ended. And then session 2 had them come up into this section here, which is N2, which was this was a lair of Ankeg. And, once they enter in, they immediately encountered several Ankeg. And Angus, of course, still being the master bowman that he is, managed to kill 2 of them instantly with his bow attacks, and then the rest of the party engaged. Candrius killed a second. A third was killed by not Crandon. A third was killed by one of the other players. Geez, I'm losing it now. Grum. A third was killed by Grum. Grum was the one of the henchmen, one of the dwarven henchmen with their group, and so he had come in and killed the 4th and final Ankhed that they had faced in here. Then they started to devise a plan. They saw these mounds that they had come through, and they had noticed like a scattering of some coins here and there throughout this large area, and they wanted to check inside these large mounds to see if they could find more in there. And that's when they came up with the idea of dropping, some of them have these coins with light spells cast on them, continual light spells cast on them, but they wanted to do something more temporary because they were going to just toss these coins or these beads that they cast a light spell on down into these what look almost like large anthill kind of things, to see what they can see downwards. And then as they look downwards into each of these, they systematically went from one to the next to the next. They started to discover that 4 of these 6 mounds or so had various treasures down at the bottoms of them, mostly copper. Um, you know, this was formerly a copper mine, and it was also formerly the lair of a copper dragon. And so they're investigating this lair to find out what killed the copper dragon, whose remains they discovered outside, or at least that's what they believe they discovered outside of the lair. So the fact that they're finding a lot of copper coins in here is not extraordinary. They also expected to find Ankeg in here because they had already encountered an Umber Hulk, and through the Druid's knowledge, they knew that Umber Hulks dietary selection included Ankegs, and so as a DM, I'm trying to trying to strike that balance and make this cavern system make ecological sense. All right, and that's very, very important when you're creating dungeons for or cavern systems or whatever. When you're putting things into your own created space, you're making sure that it makes sense. And I'm going to switch views back and continue just chatting. So the players go through, have their characters search through that particular room, and then they begin moving on. They discover, a large cache of copper coins. In total, about 6,000 copper coins throughout that entire lair, and several pieces of jewelry which they weren't quite able to just yet assess for their value, but they certainly took those as well. They left the coins, behind, and they begin moving on through the various corridors. Now, in the next corridor, they encounter a creature that none of them had encountered before, and it turns out to be a carrion crawler. And the most dangerous thing about a carrion crawler is that it gets 8 attacks a round, and those attacks, even though they don't deal damage, at least initially, they do deal paralyzation. And so out comes this carrion crawler, which they kind of surprised, and they go into the combat, and once again, the combat takes place. Angus actually missed his attack on it, and which was a rare case for Angus to miss with his attacks, and then, or with one of his attacks, his second attack only did a small amount of damage, which was another rarity. So he managed to only do like his minimum damage was like seven points of damage or so. And then Crandon, the halfling thief, threw 2 of his daggers at it, and finally the second dagger hit and killed the carrion crawler. Now, this normally wouldn't be a big deal, but it was the other party members who actually said, I believe that, and it might have even been, it might have been the, not Mirador. It wasn't a Malric. It might have been Breeze, who was like, hey, I think this was the first kill that Crandon actually scored. It was the first finishing blow, let's say, that Crandon actually scored. And, after a little bit of discussion, we're like, hey, you know what? It actually is. This is the first time that the halfling thief actually killed or finished off a creature or monster that they had encountered. And so that became, an important aspect to this particular session. And once again, it just reaffirms how this party is starting to come together, and they're starting to memorize or remember the stories of the other player characters and the events and just the experiences of the other player characters in the group. So it's really amazing. They continue on, and they come into another larger tunnel space, and they, in that case, they encounter, all of a sudden, this time they were taken by surprise, and they encounter an Ankeg who comes out, and it attacks the three characters at the point. So the three characters at the point was Grum, Gruff, and the and Crandon. So we have the Dwarven Fighter, the Dwarven Thief, and the Halfling Thief are the three on the point of this group. And so there was a 1 in 3 chance of Crandon getting hit. And so I asked him to make his roll to see if it was him, and it turned out, he said, I'll be 1 and 2 on the D6, and I rolled the D6, and it wasn't a 1 or a 2, so it wasn't him. And this attack of the Ankeg was devastating. All right, it took Grum the thief from his maximum hit points of 17 down to -4. All right, and then I started making the system shock checks to see if he survived, and he had survived at that point, but he was still in the mandibles of the Ankeg, and the Ankeg was already starting to, spray its acid on him, and so he took that additional damage from the acid as well, and so he's just like kind of limply, in this thing's clutches, and that is when Breeze, it was finally Breeze's turn to attack, and he fired, his single arrow, and he fumbled, and that particular shot, when I determined where it was heading to, it became clear that arrow was going to hit Grum, the dwarven thief, and it took him far below. He did like 10 points of damage, so it took him down to like -14 technically, and instantly killed the dwarven thief. So the rest of the party, jumps in, and once again, Angus comes in and finishes off this Ankeg, kills it, and now the party has to deal with one of their members, because they treated these henchmen. They had 3 henchmen traveling with them. They had a dwarven fighter, a dwarven thief, and a half-orc fighter traveling with them on this particular adventure, and they now had to deal with 2 things. They had to deal with the fact that one of their members, because they treated them as members of their party, one of their members just died. One of their members was actually killed by friendly fire. Technically, although I think that they kind of realized that the chances of that thief surviving anyway were pretty slim, because he would have to continuously make these system shock checks, and he was going to be messed up, and even if he did manage to survive, another 2 points would have started giving him permanent damage as well, permanent injuries, and potential disabilities and such, and so they pretty much adopted the mentality that this really might have been a more merciful killing than what his death would have been, but also there was a consideration that the other dwarf is his cousin, and they knew of that relationship, and they knew how protective they were of each other, and they had to start going through the social interaction of trying to um, console the dwarven fighter, Gruff, who is really really broken from this incident. He had failed his morale checks. He was just devastated by this, and he was looking to just pack up and go home. And that's basically what he started to do. Was he started to pick up the body and was looking to just take the body out of there and bring his cousin's body potentially home. At least that's what he was planning on doing. And they read that, and they the players understood that that's what was going on, and they were expressing that through their characters. They were you know some were trying to convince him to remain, and they'll make sure that everything is taken care of. Others were like, understand if he wants to go, and we should escort him out. And that's ultimately what they decided to do. They were going to respect his wishes and let him carry his brother, his cousin's body uh, back home, and they were going to escort him at least to outside of this cave complex that they were in, and that's what they began doing. So as they begun doing that, they encounter another Umbra Hulk, and so now the party's like, holy cow! I mean, we're hitting these things that are substantial risks now, and that's one of the challenges of having a large group of player characters as a DM, is that you have to take into account the fact that this is nine third and fourth level characters. It's a pretty powerful group of player characters. Plus, they have two NPCs still traveling with them that are third or fourth level as well. So the challenges that they're going to start facing um, in a one-on-one is going to be much higher than what they were previously used to. Especially as they were going through the search of the unknown, that particular adventure, and even as they started to face um, various creatures in the wild. Their sheer numbers usually lets them cut through them fairly quickly, but it's in the special abilities that some of these creatures have. Like, they were lucky that none of them actually got into a long fight with an Ankeg when they start spraying their poison, stomach. Their acidic, stomach contents out in their death throes, and start dealing out like 8 to 32 damage, or something crazy like that. It's just like a tremendous amount of damage that they expend out when they're in their death throes, and so the players kind of realize that they're in a challenging situation here. I think Crandon really understood that if that were him, he'd probably be dead as well. So they know that they're into the realm now of adventuring with certainly, and they've upped the ante on the amount of risk that they're taking. And so when they encounter this Umber Hulk, they're like, "Oh my gosh, another Umber Hulk! We're going to get into a good fight here." And once again, the Umber Hulk puts more than half the party into into a state of confusion, and really only three uh, only three were not affected by, or actually even two. Only two of the player characters were not affected by this. So Angus, the fighter, Mirador, Gruff, Crandon, Cedric, Candrius, and Sparrow were all confused for that first round. And so it was just um, even though confused, Angus still fired off his arrows because it was a simultaneous initiative situation. So he still got his attacks out. Crandon still got his attacks out, and then the rest of the party with their missile weapons, they were able to still fire. But then once it got out of that first initial round, um, all the rest were now confused. And this is where they start getting nervous because the confusion check, you have to see if they just sit there and do nothing or if they attack the wrong person. And everything becomes the possibility of attacking, one of your own. And they continue going through this, and as they start making their checks, it starts turning out well. By round three, most of the party is going to start coming out and no longer confused. All right, and as they start coming out of that confusion after the third round, and during this round, only Amalric, who was not confused, and Crandon are really fighting off this thing and just waiting for the rest of the party to snap out of that confusion. And they just managed to survive. And Amalric is the one that finishes off this Umber Hulk, dealing a massive 20 points of damage, in a torso gutting stroke with his longsword. And then after the battle is over, um, Candrius actually does a lay on hands and heals up Gruff, who is now injured from this combat, and he heals him up, a number of points, making him healthy once again. And they finish escorting him and his fallen cousin the out to the cavern entrance, and that's where the session came to an end. So, for the most part, this session um, was primarily combat, in that they had 3 or 4 major combat situations take place. But more importantly than just the fact that there was a lot of combat on this, there was the interaction that took place amongst the player characters and their NPC henchmen that are traveling with them, um, and then between player character to player character as well. And during this time of exploring through these caverns, they learned a little bit about the ecology of this cavern, and just in general sense, like what they discover, uh, the ecological environment that they're in. They're learning these things, and these are memories and experiences that they're going to have moving forward. So they'll always know now in the future, Umber Hulks, you have to be worried about the confusion that they can cause. All right, and the they're suspecting that we need to walk around in places like this, always ready to glance away, and that will impact their modifiers. Excuse me. That will impact their modifiers as well, because there's yes, you can walk around like this, ready to, but it's going to impact how well you can engage in combat as well. It'll impact how much you're actually seeing in your environment as well, also. So as they're telling me, oh well, I know that we're facing these things. I know that we're going to encounter a Dracolisk in this place, or at least they suspect that they're going to, and they know that they're facing these things with gaze attacks. That is kind of setting or sowing the seeds of apprehension on their part. That's and that's by design. I mean, I'm glad that that's occurring because I want them to be cautious. I mean, even as powerful as this group is, they're starting to realize that in just one quick attack, some of these creatures has the potential of killing a third level character. Um, and so that's an important thing for players to realize when playing these games. And AD&D First Edition is much more severe, um, much more risky of playing than a more modern, Fifth Edition. Let's say you don't get all those death saves, and there's no short rests or rests where you gain half of all of your hit points or all of your lost hit points and such. So this is a game of attrition. This is a game of higher risk, and this is a game where, as powerful as you might be, there's something out there that can kill you with one shot, and it's important. I'm glad that it wasn't a player character who died, but I am glad that an NPC that they were starting to care about and certainly expressed that they cared about him. Um, Now he hadn't adventured with them for a very long time, but they were at least showing some empathy to the fact that his cousin was distraught over this and completely understanding of it, and they're starting to realize that you know this is a dangerous world, and they can lose a character, and that's very very important for your players to start to realize is that keep in mind that these aren't adventures that lack risk. And so, really great session. Really enjoyed it. Players learned a lot. I learned a lot about them, and the three pillars of role playing. So that's exploration, interaction, and combat. Are always being reflected, virtually in every session that I have run with this group of players. It's always out there. It's incumbent upon me to include those various elements, in every session. Sometimes a little bit more so towards one than another, but still always present in there at some level. And that way, the players are always thinking about those three things. What did my character learn today about the world or about the specific environment that he or she is in? What did they learn from the combat experience that they have? How are they going to prepare themselves for a similar combat against the same kind of a creature? And then just interaction with one another is something that's been developing the whole time. So very, very important for them to create relationships with even the NPCs and the henchmen that they have with them, because they want to make sure that these relationships become loyal relationships that they can rely upon in the future, and so we have that as well. So great session. Really looking forward to Monday. That's one of the benefits of being blessed with such a campaign, is that as soon as that session is over on a Monday night and I'm sitting at work on Tuesday, I'm already thinking about, all right, how am I going to do this recap? But then on top of that, how am I going to make the next session interesting for them? And what other branches might it go off into? What kind of seeds am I going to sow for them to potentially follow? And how overall am I going to advance the campaign? So yeah, I spend the rest of the week thinking about it to a certain extent, and saying, all right, what is next Monday going to look like for them? So Once again, thanks everyone for joining in. I know I got kind of long-winded on this particular one, but it's the first video of the year, and so I wanted to start off 2022 with something really positive and thought-provoking, and there we go. Again, thanks for joining. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Leave your questions and comments. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I will be coming on later on this evening in probably about 2.5 hours for a live stream. And so once this is up and you see it, be on the lookout for that live stream. You might have already gotten the alert for it as well, especially if you're subscribed and you have alerts, which I encourage you to do as well. And so I will see you in the live stream in about 2.5 hours. And you will have a great rest of your weekend. Already lost track of what day it is. It is Saturday. Enjoy your weekend. Hope you had a great new year. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You'll have a great evening. Take care.